Coming to you live from WRUE in Tennessee, it's the Scribbling Woman.
Hi, I'm Nancy Rue. I'm a scribbling woman, and so are you, and that's why we're having this conversation. Here, we talk about the writerly life that is unique to you, no matter what your season of life, your age, or where you are in your writing career, even if you don't really think you have one yet. You are now an official scribbly, so let's talk. You know, this is a disturbing time in our country. We face potential changes that will serve few of us well, and it will create even more disconcerting division. This makes us as writers pause and ask, why spend any time writing stories and memoir and poetry? Doesn't it feel frivolous? Maybe even a little bit pointless? I've had moments of feeling that way myself. But in the last of those moments, the name Harriet Beecher Stowe came to mind. You remember our Harriet. She was the author of the 1852 novel Uncle Tom's Cabin that opened the eyes of people who didn't have any personal experience with the travesty of slavery and helped launch the abolition movement. In 1862, when she was a guest at the White House, it's reported that Abraham Lincoln said to her, "Oh, so you're the little woman who wrote the book that started this great war." Story has always been powerful. And in the hands of female writers, it's powerful in a different way, a way that's relational, a way that stirs hearts and souls as well as minds. And that's why I'm continuing these episodes in which we explore the creation of stories in ways that are authentic to each of us. We have creative power in these disturbing times. Let's use it with excellence, and let's don't forget to have fun with it. Okay, I'm going to go out on the proverbial limb here and guess that as you've intentionally developed as a writer, you've been exposed to one, if not all, of the following: workshops about creating characters, webinars about creating characters, blog posts about creating characters, books about creating characters, online courses about creating characters. I'm thinking that means that making up people who come alive on the page is both essential and really challenging. As my daughter used to say when she was little, this is hard to do. I'm going to creep out even further on that limb and say that you haven't accepted absolutely everything that was offered in any one of those webinars or online courses. As a creative woman seeking an authentic process, you may have saved a piece or two here and there and woven them into approach that's your own, or at least you're getting there. But if you still don't feel confident about the people who populate your stories, fear not. You just don't feel confident yet. Those are very real, very rich, even the most rotten folks. They're in there, in you, waiting to be discovered. There isn't a hack for finding them and coaxing them out any more than there's a method for making friends. And that's what's happening when we create protagonists and antagonists and all their allies and enemies. We're in the presence of our characters, especially that protagonist who tends to take over at some point and run away with the story, right? These beings are real. They breathe, they speak, they give our work a pulse. They nudge us to go places we didn't expect to go. Doesn't it make sense then that we need to bond with them? Okay, so just so you know, we're about to get a little woo-woo here, as in na 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 na. It shouldn't scare you off because you're a writer. We all go into our imaginations and think it's real in there. If we don't think that, then our readers aren't going to think so either. And that's what we're going to explore together today. Now, here's how we're going to approach this. Since I'm always of the mind that how we do something is pretty much how we do everything, we're going to start by delving into you. And then we'll see how that applies to the characters that we need to have a deep relationship with, even the bad guys. Okay, let's consider you. And this is scribbling nudge number 1. So After you've thought about this, if you want to stop the podcast, pause, and write some things down, absolutely do that. Okay, so in your real life, which is often hard to distinguish from your imaginary one, when you meet someone and you think, I would really like to get to know this person better, how do you approach that? Do you talk about trivial stuff until you feel a little bit more comfortable? Do you invite them to Starbucks and just see what kind of coffee they order? Do you dive right in and ask about their deepest desires? Or do you watch how they interact with other people? Okay, or maybe think of it this way. Are you the interrogator, the casual conversationalist, the distant observer, the cautious one? Now, if you want to, again, pause this for a moment and write that down or just jot down some things really quick. All right, and then we'll move on to scribbling nudge number 2. What are 5 specific things that tell you a lot about a person? And this is the time to be playful and think outside the dreaded box. Okay, for instance, can you tell a lot about a person by the way they pack a suitcase? How they feel about going to the dentist? Whether they ask directions when they're lost? Whether they laugh out loud at movies when they're watching them all by themselves? How they respond when a cop pulls them over? The possibilities for that are endless. You can write down more than 5. I certainly have. All right. Scribbling nudge number 3. How do you make a new acquaintance feel comfortable around you? For example, do you do a focused activity together that doesn't require a lot of conversation, like watch a movie or go to a play and talk about it over pie afterwards or play tennis? Or do you do something side by side that kind of lends itself to chatting, like chop up vegetables for stir fry, or polish the church silver, or play cards, or go for a hike? Of course, you don't do that when you're playing bridge, I understand. Do you talk about something hypothetical and metaphorical, like which punctuation mark are you? What breed of dog? What would you do with your first million besides pay off debts? All right, that's you. That's how you acquaint yourself with actual new people. Now let's focus on your character, just one of them, perhaps your protagonist. Essentially, when you're developing a character, you're actually getting to know someone new, someone who already has quirks and a personality and likes and dislikes and strengths. It only makes sense to approach them the same way that you do a stranger. So let's look at that with scribbling nudge number 4. How can you apply the way you first get to know a person you've just met to the character you need to bond with? Okay, now don't turn off the podcast here because I'm not going to ask you to fill in one of those character information sheets that you so often see in workbooks and so on. I mean, not that that's a bad idea. It just turns a lot of creative writers off because it's sort of like giving a potential friend a form to fill out about themselves. So instead, let's do this creatively. Okay, so if you're a person who starts off by talking about trivial stuff, what can you ask your character? Where'd you get those great boots? You have a Mini Cooper? Cool. What turned you on to those? I couldn't help noticing your Ireland t shirt. Have you been? Now, if you're more likely to just observe their preferences, what situation would you put your character in so you can watch their choices? Do you check out what flavor ice cream they order? What books they check out of the library? Which store they gravitate to in the mall? Of course, this actually involves, you realize, taking your character out to these places and imagining that they're with you. Yeah, I told you it was woo woo. Now, if you're one of those go deep or go home when you meet somebody new, what will you ask? Will you say, what was your childhood like? What was the hardest part of being an adolescent? What was your biggest heartbreak? Whose heart did you break? And for this, I suggest journaling with your character. Get a journal that matches them or even just a blank notebook and ask the question, write it at the top of the page, and then just let them know. Let them scribble on, let them fill up the pages. You will probably lift some of this stuff directly out of that journal and put it right into your manuscript. Try it, woo woo as it is. Now, if your method is to observe the character with other people, what kinds of things will you look for? Are they a pleaser or one who likes to kind of stir it with a stick? Are they the center of attention or more of a watcher like you? Do they seem to get energy from being around other people or do they get drained within 10 minutes? Now, this one is done best, but just kind of playing with a scene that may never end up in the story or in the memoir, just to get a feel for the thing. If this all sounds like a lot of pondering and writing before you actually write the story, you're absolutely correct. This is what we in the Scribblies call soft writing. It's the part of the process that may or may not make it to the final page, but informs the entire thing. And we neglect this to the detriment of our characters who really long for you to know them. Scribbling nudge number 5. How can you make your protagonist feel comfortable with you? Because he or she is not going to show up on the page authentically unless they really feel like you're going to allow them to be their true selves. So you do this in the same way that you do with a new acquaintance. Only in the case of your character, bring along a notebook or a journal for capturing all the gold that they are going to give you. For example, can you find out what they enjoy and then actually do it with them? I've played soccer with 10-year-old triplets. I took a surfing lesson. I ate Vietnamese food. I hiked around Walden Pond with my characters, just to name a few things I might not have done otherwise. The information was invaluable. Can you have that hypothetical or metaphorical conversation with them just for fun? Like, what punctuation mark are you? Maybe do it with your whole cast of characters. Turn on a recorder and do it in different voices. Are you up for that? The process of bonding with characters, not just making them up, needs to be as creative as the writing of the story itself. And again, it is the writing. So get in there and get some of it on you. It's an absolutely delicious experience. And finally, scribbling nudge number 6. Ask yourself, are you at all like the character? When some of us begin to get to know somebody in real life, we reveal things about ourselves to determine whether we have anything in common. We look for nods of interest or eyes glazing over. But if we only choose friends who are exactly like us or very nearly, our life is going to be pretty boring, and so are our stories. But when we truly start to know someone deeply, we usually find out that we're alike in ways that we didn't see at first. Now, hear me out here, because this is where you really do have to get into your imagination and live there for a while. Can you open a blank page in your character's journal and at the top write, how do you see me? Do you see yourself in me? I recently did this with my current protagonist because Freddie is on the surface the least like me than any character I've ever introduced to the world. Freddie is non binary, 35 years old. I'm twice that and then some. A single mom, divorced, a visual artist as well as a writer, completely unorganized in that cheerfully, happily chaotic way that I just cannot pull off. Without any desire to get to know a God who they feel is authoritative and punitive. Raised in an authoritarian household and therefore now creatively resistant and fiercely independent. It doesn't sound like me at all. But when I asked Freddie how they saw me and whether they thought we were at all alike, the results were pretty astonishing. Just to name a few, she said, or they said, you too have a male and a female spirit. We all do, if we're honest with ourselves. You're an artist. You live your whole life artistically. We just express it in different ways. You don't think you're fiercely independent? What about that inner freedom of yours that you protect? You have a lot to teach me. And there it is, Scribblies. Our characters have so much to show us about ourselves, and then we, in turn, can guide them through their world. It's a beautiful, symbiotic, reciprocal relationship. If we see it as such and bond with their characters, they will come alive on the page and they will live in the souls of our readers. Why else do we write in these disturbing times? On this week's blog post, I'll continue to take you through this process and give some more ideas about how to bond with your people. In upcoming episodes, we'll explore more elements of fiction and memoir in this same unique interactive way. So you can absolutely go to that blog post at www.nancyrue.com. And of course, in upcoming episodes, as we continue here, you can subscribe right here so you don't miss a single one. And until then, Scribblies, scribble on.